Wonderful. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the podcast. This is Michael REXEN and Emil Jensen from REXEN Patreon doing our first project just for you, patrons out there. Thank you so much for your support. It's all because of your support that we are here today and excited about delivering this podcast to you, which is a new format that we're trying out on the page that we'd like to build on. Before, we've always done shows that or like material that revolved around my touring business and then stories from those trips. Now it's more about my touring business and the things and experiences that I have there, and then we go into certain subjects. The podcast could end up also having subjects. We would love it to have subjects about special music scenes and things like that. But after my trip to China, it simply was something else that was on my mind, something that both Emil and I really care about, which is societal structures, economic balances, and a general desire to understand how the sharing of wealth and how these different societies that we interact with while I tour are set up. China was mind-blowing, and this show is going to be about two subjects, basically. Subject one, what Michael saw with his own eyes. And then, sweet Emil Jensen, subject two, yeah, but what does the data say? Now, Emil is our in-house data expert. I know you don't like me to say that. That's fine. Please tell us, why do I sometimes call you that?
Well, I mean, I would never call myself that because I've only studied a bachelor in economics and philosophy, but one of my main concerns doing this was inequality of wealth and workers' rights, and also the nature of work, and also like moral angles on how to do economy. But nevertheless, it kind of peeked into my interest field when Michael told me all of these things, and then I got very critical, of course. Like, I've heard stories about China, and I've always been taught to be kind of afraid of China in a way. Like, there's this threat from the east, this huge country that continues to grow both in population and in power, and like it seems that China has always been, since the Cold War, like the boogeyman, along with certain other countries that we won't go into now. But it's just interesting to me that we have this narrative also in the West that I think has a lot to do with the Cold War. And can you maybe start, Michael, by telling me, because like what drove you to wanting to make this podcast?
Yeah. So first of all, I was shocked when I came to China, when it felt like, oh my God, everything that I thought that I knew about this place it felt wrong anyway. Like what I saw with my own eyes was something completely different than many of the thoughts that I had. And then when I came back and I had sort of like purposefully made my algorithm into a China algorithm, right? I wanted to get a hold of all the creators and all the people that were talking about it, and it was the reaction that I got from people when I started to share it was was really like, you don't know what you're talking about, or have you not thought about this? And then people sharing all kinds of things, people also coming in and saying, like, oh yeah, but I've been there and it's all kinds of fucked. And also some people, like being like, coming up to me on the street that I'd meet that'd been like, have you gone insane? I don't know what the fuck you're doing. Like, kind of with some anger involved in it, And also a good friend of mine kind of had to come in and be like, oh, so have you become manic or something? Do I need to check in on you? Simply because of that subject. So I'll say that my good friend there also is a Tibetan Buddhist and has something to do with that. So it did touch a nerve with him, and it really, it was obvious to me that it's a super hot subject. Let's say you know, like people have opinions about it, and it really showed in all of my commentaries there, or what's it called what's it called the comments of the Facebook and Instagram threads, that it was a real hot subject. So when our conversation started going, I was super interested also because one of the things that you didn't mention in you didn't mention what it is that you do with your bachelor. Your bachelor makes you quite versed in data analysis and also being critical about that data.
That's one of the things, and I specifically took some subjects that were very much in conjunction with that. But I would say like the education that I've been taking has been more focusing around taking up structures, economic structures, or localized economic problems, and then being able to apply philosophical discourse to it to solve issues, both in terms of like being able to advise businesses, but also to be able to understand bigger structural issues, which is something that we can't really get around when we talk about China and we talk about it from this perspective of people like having like some kind of knowledge also based on a little bit of moral superiority. It's interesting to use that kind of philosophical critical thinking to see what's underneath what people say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's what I usually analyze, and I usually do interview data collection, but I also spend a lot of time on analyzing data from the EU and the OECD regarding jobs.
What is OECD?
It's a world-spanning economic organization that collects data and tries to solve different issues. For instance, issues around the gig economy with Volt and all these things, like new forms of work. And yeah, but that's enough for my credentials, I would say. Like,
Yeah.
I'm just also interested in what Michael has to say, and also I wanted to hear about his experiences. So maybe you can start out by kind of, just describing your journey.
Sure. And you've got a little set list, or what's it called? You've got a little list of things that we're going through that you're prompting me to now. That's great. You're doing such a great job. Okay, so what happened? Okay, first of all, I was invited there to be a part of a faculty of guys, we're going to just be talking to each other now, just so you know. Maybe we'll ask you a few questions, but we're just going to be looking at each other, having a conversation. Emil has probably heard some of this before. For your sake, let's go. First of all, I was invited to be a part of a faculty of a music camp, which is a tradition that we have here in Denmark and other places, where you hire in great musicians and instrumentalists, and then you come in as a young person that's looking to evolve your styles, and you become a part of that music camp. This is a Danish arranged camp in China. Okay, so we come into Beijing, and we were on that trip. We were only in the northeast, meaning like in Beijing and east of Beijing, and we stayed in enormously rich areas. Where we were staying in something called the Aranya community, where the actual camp was happening, which is basically like a massive gated community. Everything in China is massive. So I got a sort of image of that, but I also was very aware that, okay, Beijing and this Aranya community and all this, I'm hanging out with, upper middle class people. But so we went on this, and we were just in these closed areas, and I already got sort of a feeling about that. This is different than I thought. I'll tell you the real thing that I'm sure that a lot of people believe, even if they've said it loud or not, that Chinese people live in such an extreme oppression from their government that they can't be people. Like that they can't be... that they all have to, it was, the feeling of like, they have the same clothes, everybody has to wear kind of this type of clothes, and that, there wasn't a lot of space for avant-garde art, for example, or things like that. After that trip, I was in Thailand, where I was doing some shows in Thailand, and I was giving a lecture at the conservatory there. I then also there met loads of Chinese people, and meaning young people traveling. Other people that had realized it's cool to smoke, Thailand's nice, you can smoke a bit of weed and chill out for a bit, and you can afford it, So I played at a festival there that was kind of like arranged by like a Pan-Asian group of Vietnamese, Thai people, Japanese people, and Chinese people all over. And it was just, again, I started getting in on the internet side of it, becoming, following each other on Instagram, and suddenly realized like, wow, avant-garde art and absurdist things and extreme experiences, or cultural things, is very real in China, happens all over the place, and they're not experiencing the type of cultural oppression that I had been told that they or had an idea about that they've been, And I've noticed this with a lot of people that I've talked to about it also, that sort of say, yeah, but they're all under the social credit system or whatever, which is, as far as I can tell, the whole sort of social credit score thing, it doesn't exist. I asked so many people, nobody either knew what I was talking about, and a few people said like, but there is like an area in Shenzhen that's an economic free zone where they do that kind of thing. But, and also when you go to China and you realize there's 1.45 billion people, you also realize like how absurd it is that you would even be able to keep track of that amount of people in that way. And funnily enough, then I will say that America does have a social credit score, credit system. It's called.
Can you explain to me what that exactly means?
Yes. So the U.S. has this thing called credit score. I don't know a lot about it. I just have a few friends. Both in Canada has the same, and basically it's a way for you. You have to have a good credit score to be able to get a loan, for example. But people also use it in all kinds of other, like, for example, rent an apartment. Do you have good credit score? Your credit score is supposed to show that you're a good payer, How do you get a credit score? Only by borrowing money and then paying it off.
So it's like a centralized score, whereas in Denmark you have more of like, okay, the individual bank will look at your finances, and of course, some circumstances, if you have a lot of debt, you are in RKI, like you can't borrow money because, like you're deemed irresponsible enough.
Sure.
But it's actually up to the bank to kind of negotiate your credit value every time you try to take a loan, and you can go to different banks and ask for a different loan, and in that way it's like.
And this actually gets used in all kinds of situations outside of the bank in the US, the way that I've understood it anyway. And so okay, back to China. Then I had that first trip there, and meeting all these Chinese people out and abroad, young Chinese artists and all that, it got me super excited about it. So I did everything in my power. I was just like, within a year, I have to be back. And by some amount of luck and some amount of my gusto and my amazing team that worked behind but with my music, shout out to Sundance Records, they're the best. We got another tour going. And this tour, I got to get outside of Beijing. We did a few shows in Beijing, and then down to Shanghai, out to Nanjing, a city called Xiamen, and Guangzhou. Most of these places, you've probably heard of Beijing and Shanghai. Maybe you've heard of Nanjing, but you probably don't have any idea of it. I didn't have an idea of it. These are all amazing cities. These are all cities of enormous beauty, and just, I can't believe that there's water fountains in so many public spaces, and public toilets all over the place, and then also just taking the public transport system was incredible, right? That there was just that's something that really started to be like, what the hell is going on over here? Why am I not been? why have I been told the opposite of all of this in a way, you know? I've now come back and I'll say China, the public transport system of China is the pearl of our earth. It is the most efficient and widespread and affordable public transport system that exists. It has to be. Again, two subjects. Michael saw with his own eyes. But what does the data say?
Yeah, well, before going into any kind of data, I have a couple of questions for it, because I think the elephant in the room, and I also think you told me you received some criticism on, you being in certain places, and of course you just told us rich places. So but I got the notion that some people also felt like you were kind of being curated as a Westerner coming there. You got a certain view of China curated to you.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you could easily say that, but that's not what happened. The people that work for us as bookers there have absolutely nothing to do with the government system or anything like that. There's no, and we just go into cities where there are. When you tour, you go to cities, bigger or smaller. You have to find a scene that you can play, especially when you're coming in like we are, where we're coming from zero. It means 0 people know me in China. We have to go to the cities to try and see if there's somebody that'll come to our gigs, I will say that there is a point to the criticism of saying like, okay, so let's say that you only travel with the high-speed rail. The high-speed rail is more expensive than the low-speed rail, right? So even though that it is enormously long, stretching, and a lot of people are using it, then there is inevitably an enormous amount of people in China that hasn't been on the high-speed rail, right? That for whatever reasons, maybe they're not traveling, maybe they're not doing that. They're using other sorts of public transport. So we were on the high-speed rail, and we were also flying sometimes while we were there. So it's not like I'm spend a lot of time in rural China, I did, though, talk to an enormous amount of people, and, I shout out to Andrew Callahan and all the people over at Channel 5. Amazing, always using this point that I saw Callahan make. The person that you talk the most to is the person that you're going to have a bias towards. So I had that in mind. When I talk to people, I'm going to try to talk to as many people as possible, and I'm going to try and see if I can get some different perspectives. And a lot of people, just like in Europe, they come from rural areas, and then they came to the city. And, they were all like, oh yeah, it's the vacation now, I'm going to go home to my area, And these are these are people that, they would say, like, some people said to me, sure, there are richer and then there are poorer areas. But the point is that they were like, but the rural areas are farmers. So they're not rich, but they're also not living in extreme poverty. Like, it's because my way of being able to divide this up also is comparing it to, like, let's say India. I usually tell people India is the place where you can see the most amount of human suffering on the planet Earth. There is nowhere else in the world where you can be in a city and a person gets, with no arms or legs, is getting wheeled by their daughter on a skateboard and they're begging, The extremities of India are just so unbelievable. And there will not be a single place or a single city or something where there isn't an enormous homeless population, And that's another thing. I did my best. I did my best to look everywhere, to try and take a bus, to take a walk as far as I could walk in a city that I came to, and spend 2 hours that way, come 2 hours back, and I didn't see any homeless people. I think maybe... Wait, now I say didn't see any. I think I saw one person. In Guangzhou, I saw a person that was sleeping under a bridge, under a bunch of blankets. And I was like, okay, there's our one.
But of course, there could be a ton of reasons for you not seeing them. Like, I mean, just because they're not inside in the cities.
Yeah.
Because it's like let's take for instance, some of the coping strategies going on right now in the U.S. Of course, the U.S. has a lot of problems with income inequality and housing, and this of course pushes a lot of people out into poverty. And instead of trying to, like they will try to prevent people from having access to the middle of the gentrified city, and they will push them out, and they will hide somewhere else.
Sure. And what's it called? Anti-homeless architecture or
Yeah,
anti-homeless
spikes or big rocks so they can't sleep. And
totally. I'll say that there wasn't any of that, any of those big rocks or sleepy spikes or anything like that. But I could easily imagine, since that the way that it seems to me that the Chinese government reacts to things is quite swiftly, and without, so sure, could there be enormous homeless encampments in and around cities that I didn't see? Pretty sure that that's happening. And the reason that I'm sure about that is because everything that exists in Europe exists in China. Like, this is another thing. Like this, I have this, like.
But you're talking about amenities now.
Yeah.
Yeah, like hospitals or.
No. I mean, if we have homelessness, they have homelessness.
Yeah.
They have mental illness, pandemics of mental illness or problems or epidemics, it's called.
Mm-hmm.
We have that. All of the same sort of human issues exist there. It's not that they've just eradicated it, and they just have. There's definitely different ways of dealing with it, but it's kind of hard to. Then if we go into this thing with homelessness, so China does have a different way of dealing with the concept of housing, since that. I mean, it's not long ago that I saw a headline from Xi Jinping saying, houses are for living in, not for speculating.
Mm-hmm.
So they have created these big free zones and places where they've tested all kinds of waters with, because they also love to make money, and they could see, so it requires free zones to be able to put things on the market, to be, selling and buying things, and there's all kinds of rules with it, but there is enormous amount of public housing. This would be something amazing to get some data on, and like how the public housing and all that system works. So I could imagine that because of their deep communist socialist roots, and that their whole thing is social order. That's what they care about. That's like the function of so many of their policies revolves around social order. And one of them is to try and create income equality, or at least some kind of equality around housing and things like that. It's I've seen it. I can't directly quote any of the things that I've seen that I'm basing this on, but I can say that it would make sense to me if they had a little bit less of a percentage problem than, for example, the US, since that they have such strong policies and sort of political culture built up around making sure that everybody has a place to stay and that everybody has a job.
Yeah, I can also, I just wanted to look something up because I was curious. So I found using a reference from the newspaper called The Guardian, had an article, and then I followed back the reference into this page called the Global Property Guide. And this is just me quickly finding something to talk about here. And it looks like, I don't know if I can show it, but this is the annual change in house prices. And as we all know, both in Denmark and the US right now, we have big problems with this.
Mm-hmm.
That housing, especially in the cities, are just rising and rising and rising in prices, and also to an extent where a lot of people move out of Copenhagen to start a new life and repopulate the quote-unquote rural areas,
mm-hmm.
or udkant Danmark.
Mm-hmm.
But here you can see very clearly, if we're to take these stats for what they want to show us, that it's actually falling, and then like the trend is that they had a bubble here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then it's actually falling kind of.
What are the two?
Which
There's a red and a blue line. What do they?
it's just one of them is the real, so that's adjusted for inflation, and the other one is nominal, so that's just like if you take the hard prices, like the flat prices, but when you do the real thing, you do this in all sorts of economic measurements that you adjust for inflation.
Sure.
But as you can see, it's the same trends.
Yeah.
Whether or not you do it real or nominal, it's still the same trends.
Understood. Well, I think that you can expect that they have all kinds of policies in place to try and because this is the thing, China is a controlled economy, right? It is not, John Smith, Adam Smith's, invisible hand. It is not this idea of free market capitalism. It is a controlled economy where they have control over to be able to go in and say, we need these prices down. So they put in policies to do it. And this is one thing that China is very good at, as far as I've been told as well, or that seems to be, is that they're good at changing their policies. You can't change the party, but you can change the policies. Like the policies are constantly moving, and that it's easy to go into and deal with.
And also we talked about this because we can easily I think my preconception or presupposition of what China was that there's this one party, and it's centralized and they decide everything. But then we kind of looked into how the governing of China kind of works in practice. And what we found was that there's a lot of differences in how the provinces themselves, like the regions of China, govern themselves, and how they want tax policies to be, and how they want, different welfare structures or hospitals. And in that way, it also makes sense to me that if you have a country with such a huge population, there's just pragmatic reasons that you can't do anything centralized. And this is, of course, I think one of these, the presuppositions I have stem from, of course, hearing about the Cultural Revolution, or how they tried to centralize farming and stuff, killed millions of people because they had this idea that they could govern everything by just collecting people into communes, and of course it really didn't work out. If you look at it from a basic human perspective, millions died, and it was kind of based loosely on ideas coming from the Soviet Union. And unluckily for them, the Soviet Union has a lot of propaganda, and they don't want to show the real results, and they also fucked up doing this. This is one of the problems of the naive kind of what do you call it, when you do policy based on only idealism and not pragmatism and not trial and error. Stuff like this happens, and it seems to me that just for pragmatic reasons, they have to figure out, what do you pay in taxes in this area? How do we implement the public transportation system and infrastructure? How, actually, you can kind of compare it to in the EU, right? The EU. We live in the EU. We perceive ourselves as people having freedom and democratic influence, and we vote for the elections and stuff. At the same time, I've experienced that a lot of people don't really know to what extent, the EU is 90-something% of every kind of lawmaking procedure that we do, all practical kind of.
In Denmark.
Yeah, in Europe. And then of course every country has some kind of sovereignty in how they want to implement it, but they're constantly supervised by the EU, and they can get sanctioned. And if we don't live up to the standards of the EU, we get sanctioned, we can get punishment with the extreme consequence of being excluded. And in China, you also have to figure out these things.
Yeah.
And the only thing that we can know for sure is that there are both economic and governmental differences in the provinces, and who drives these changes and this influence. It has to be people working through bureaucracy, through research, through trial and error, through all these things. So even though we can talk about, you know, even though we can talk about being free or unfree to discuss certain values and stuff, the country still has to run.
Yeah. I think that this is an interesting segue, actually, to one of the West towards China is this thing of what is freedom? So this is something that a lot of people that I asked about, and a lot of people online, they will say this pretty simple statement. They'll say, while the West it talks about freedom, China talks about security. So people say, what's important for us is that this place works and that we're a part of it. Like that we work on a lot of people will say, hey man, we have such a massive country. If we got to feed everybody has to take part. So what they care about is that the train runs on time, that they have safety, that we would like that the police force actually works. I had this experience down there where somebody first of all, there are around in the different cities, there'll be like little posters of the local sheriff and his deputies, and they'll have like an area, is something that I experienced. And then I met somebody that told me that they had their horse stolen. I nearly said no, their dog stolen. They realized that the dog is gone within no time, and then they call the police, and within 5 minutes, I'll just let you finish with what you're doing there.
I'm just looking up some stats that I got from the UN.
Oh yeah, nice. Let's you do that. I'll continue. Yeah. So they say within 5 minutes the sheriff turns up and starts talking to them about what the problem is, and then the police start to try and solve the crime.
Yeah.
Immediately, and within 2 hours they had the dog back. Right. So. In Denmark, I think that I've heard people use this term about the Danish police, that they are garbage men. This is not a term used to sort of put them down or anything like that. By the way, garbage men are amazing. Shout out. But that they kind of don't really have this thing of being able to they just have to bring people from A to B. If there's some kind of violent situation, bring that violent person to this place. Their job isn't to investigate something. Their job is to come and take a report, and then something else will investigate it, or not, right? So there is this kind of thing of oh, okay, so. Yeah, so I keep on coming back to this thing of a different societal contract.
Yeah.
It's a very high context society. Denmark also high context society. What's something that we're very famous for? We stop for the red walking, even if there aren't any cars. Middle of nowhere.
Well, not in Nørrebro, but
maybe not in Nørrebro, no, but some people in Nørrebro,
yeah, I know what you mean.
Right? Like there is a cultural thing that's a high context society that kind of goes and I remember somebody that told me, he was like, yeah, but it's just, it's this thing of just, you got to keep, we're all doing our part in a way,
Yeah, but there's also the trust thing, right? If you go, I remember this article about a Danish woman that lived in the States, and she did the thing that is normal in Denmark, that if you bring your baby in a baby carriage, you go to a cafe, of course you put the baby carriage outside
with the baby
in it, and you go to the cafe and everything is fine and dandy, nobody touches it, nobody even thinks about touching it. And it's just a normal cultural thing, but she actually got pressed charges against because of neglect.
Yeah.
So totally. There is a difference in kind of what you can expect in just being in a city, being in a place, how much can you kind of trust stuff to not be harmful towards you, or is it like the perception of taking risk is different because
Totally.
there's a different culture and understanding.
And if I could just go, exactly that. You're so right. And then there's this thing with this again with the cultural, societal contract thing, where, oh shit, I just had it with the thing with the babies. Yeah. Sorry, lost my thread there.
I think I want to continue into something else as well, because one
Yeah.
of the things that kind of blew me back a little bit with this was because I was, of course, very critical. And then we're talking about the state of, what do you call it? You could say, like, how many people are in the Chinese middle class now? And this was important to me because having a stable middle class can be a very great asset to a country. It's like that can be a way of perceiving welfare and freedom in a country, economic freedom. You can buy a house, you can buy a car, you can maybe even dream of buying a bigger house, or
you have some.
You can secure.
You have time off,
and you can secure the basic necessities and also something on top of that for your family. And that, of course, is something that is desirable to most people.
Totally.
And we think about China often as a very oppressed country, and still it seems like they're working very heavily towards actually securing these basic kind of, not only basic, but like a good baseline economy for the average citizen. And it's I think I looked it up, and it's like 400 million people right now in China, out of the, I don't remember, 1.4. Is that the number? I
think it's 1.4, about 1.45 billion people in China. Yeah.
And they kind of went from a standpoint of, in the early 2000s, they had like 1% of the population being, in the middle class. The rest was in extreme poverty, or if you had political power, you could be in some kind of higher class society. But now it has moved so that we're just seeing a gigantic surge in economic growth. Also partly because they invited certain aspects of the market economy that we know in the West into their market, and they started trading a lot, and they started also trading a lot with countries that we in the West exploited a lot, like Africa.
Sure.
And they want to trade with them and deal with them. But I just found this, like, I wanted to show this because this kind of shows this achievement very well. This is, of course, from a little bit of a different angle. It's not about how many got taken into the middle class. It's more about how many got taken out of extreme poverty. And this kind of blew me back as well. Like, I was looking through globalis.dk, which is like a Danish representation of the UN database. So all the data is collected by the UN. Then you can put whatever credibility you want into the UN, but I regard it as a credible source. And I found the statistics, and I don't know if you can see it from here, but what we have is that in 1990, we have like almost 80% of the people in China living in what we define as extreme poverty. And as you can see, we're now down to the last numbers that came in.
2019, can't even see the block.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So this is this
is an unbelievable achievement, right?
Yeah.
And because it's been this is over the last 30 years, right? Did I see that? Was that 1990?
Yeah, 30 years.
This makes sense to me from a people saying that the sort of slightly older generation that I met, maybe like 60s, 70s, like a taxi driver that was okay at English, or somebody that had been, that would say like, yes, this is what we built. This is what we did. Look at, I go sometimes to the metro just to enjoy it, because they were there on the ground, being a part of that movement where, have you heard of China's 996 concept? I think, as far as I know, some of that has been outlawed in China now. But there was this thing in a period where they said, what we want you to do is work from 9 in the morning to 9 at night, 6 days a week. And if you do that, we'll give you this in return. This is the deal that they made. And then it
What do
seems
you mean, like deal in terms of like a social
a
contract
social
thing?
contract thing.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. The 996. They're saying it's 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. If you work that, everybody works on that. We will build this into an amazing. And what we'll give you back is public transport, public housing, places to live, clean streets, a functioning system, a functioning police force, so on. So it's safety, social order, and they seem to have, paid in on that deal in a way. So this thing of showing that from extreme poverty in the 90s to nearly none in 2019. There are people alive right now that got to see that transformation. And when you go online to see a bunch of videos and all kinds of things, you will see that they also love to kind of show that. They love to say, look at these images from 1970s, 80s Chengdu, for example. And then it's like, there's some black and white images that I saw with people pulling around fucking, there's no cars around. It kind of looks like, I don't want to shit on India because I love India and Indian people. It is one of the most unbelievable places on the earth. But yeah, it kind of looked like what a lot of India looks like now. Enormously chaotic, open sewers, dirty, no trash system and all that. And then they're like, okay, let's just go, 40 years into the future, and then there's just this, well-functioning metropolis, or whatever you call it. That's another thing. China is basically built and run by engineers, so they do these unbelievable engineering feats. One of the ways of having like the ability to, their true army is their army of workers, and yeah, it was this ability to go in and say, let's build an area. Okay, we're going to build this area of the city, and then they just do it in a matter of years. They create these unbelievable places because they have this ability to mobilize their workforce, which is incredible. It's also not like you can't see. I saw some. Now I'm just reminded. I came in on a social media creator which was trying to show a Chinese person trying to show like, hey, we also have workers' rights issues in China. Like just like, and it's coming back to my point about all these same issues that we have in the West. The same issues exist in China. They're just dealing with them in a slightly different way. Sometimes they do it better. Sometimes they do it worse. There isn't. I'm not. Just trying not to say like China is the just everything they do is just so much better. They're doing it differently, and sometimes they're getting some other stuff out of it, that is super interesting. But what I can say is that they are equal to us in amazingness of the things that went well for them. They're just doing it in different ways,
Yeah, I have something to say to this because when I was studying economics, I read this very interesting article that was by two microeconomists, which is like, to me, like the microeconomy is it's a very mathematically, there's a lot of presuppositions, and it's primarily focused around measuring profit maximization in different scenarios, and I would say it leads to a very liberal, not in like neoliberal way of thinking of maximizing profits and stuff. But what they did was that they kind of wanted to investigate this classic dichotomy of regulated economies versus unregulated economies. For instance, Denmark is seen as a regulated economy because we have a lot of rules for what you can and cannot do, and what businesses can do in a code of conduct way. And in the US, for instance, we have a very unregulated economy. And the unregulated economy, what they looked at was performance. And they were very surprised to find out, because of their presuppositions about this, that you couldn't actually measure one as being more effective than the others in creating wealth. But what they could measure, or what they could, empirically confirm, was that Yeah, so I'm getting a little distracted.
I see that. I'm sorry. Go ahead. What they could confirm
Was that their conclusion was not that one was better than the other. It was just that in a regulated economy, what you can do is you can hire people for 10 years doing research. And this leads to some, whereas in the States, it's a boom-bust economy. You have to produce economic results instantly or you're fired.
Mm-hmm.
And there's not a lot of job security, so you get fired. In regulated economies like Denmark, for instance, there's a lot of rules about job security and how much, how the notice you have to get. And also, you can just put effort into projects that are very long-term. And you can decide already now for the next 10 years, this group of scientists or this group of, what do you call it, lawyers or economists, or you have to solve this problem, and this just leads to different developments, different kind of wealth creation, different amenities, and the narrative often in the West is that innovation thrives only under unregulated economic conditions, but it's just
Even
to say that it's different, and we could make like a. Of course, this is a rough idea that I'm presenting to you, but if we have like very regulated stuff, regulated over here, and we have like the unregulated over here. Like one of the most unregulated countries I can think of is the US. We're over here, and one of the most regulated I can think of is China.
Yeah.
And then, of course, somewhere in the middle we have Denmark and the north, and we could put stuff like Italy over here, which is, like Southern Europe. They're a little bit more conservative in their economic thinking, and they don't have as much welfare stuff and rules around corruption, actually they're starting to get, but that's besides the point. But if you see this as like a spectrum.
Yeah.
In Denmark, you can make longer investments in research, for instance, like longer term investments, and this leads to different kind of innovations.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just the reason I wanted to bring this in, is that in China, you said yourself that it seems to you that you can actually decide the next 20 years we're just going to work on public transportation, and this is our goal.
Yeah.
Whereas in the US, you'd have to start a project. After 2 years, evaluate, is this something that's economically feasible, or, is it producing wealth now?
Sure.
So you get short-term developments, and you focus on that. In regulated economies, you get long-term. You get the ability to do long-term.
Yeah, which is obviously something that China prides itself on its ability to make long-term progress, take decisions on that. Right, we're coming into our 48th minute here.
Oh, shit.
So we're doing really well. I thought about maybe we could segue over to quite a hot subject here that we've been wanting to talk about as well, which is the oppression of minorities.
Of course, the elephant in the room here,
because
that is what provoked also a lot of responses when you were very excited and sharing stuff on social media. Actually, we should probably have started with that, because it's just very important for me to say that this is not like a pro-China podcast.
No.
This is just a response to the overwhelming criticism of saying anything that's positive about China.
Yeah, exactly.
And
also seeing that there is no positive.
Like a little disclaimer is that we're both freedom-loving individuals from the West that sees civil liberties as the most important things. You even have the amnesty candle tattooed on your breast. It's about human rights. It's about freedom of expression, freedom of speech. All of these things we value very highly, both of us, I know.
Uh-huh.
And of course, like when I looked up statistics on like what they call the democracy index, it's like China. 1 is the worst, of course, and 7 is the best. We have Denmark and the US with like 6 to 7. Don't know how exactly they measure this, but it's the UN, and it's basically every country in the world deciding on these rules for measuring. And China went from like 1 to 2.
Yeah, sure.
So in terms of that freedom of speech, expression,
It doesn't basically like the whole sort of concept of the way that the democracies are set up with like the press as sort of like a watchdog
yeah,
over it. It doesn't exist. You know, like you're not. But it doesn't mean that people don't have the ability to express what it is that they feel. I usually like to tell people the simple fact that something that I really enjoyed a lot in China was sitting on streets, drinking beer publicly, and talking about politics. So it's not like people hush you down or anybody else is there. They like to have discussions about what's going on and how they do their structures. It's just not in the press, you know. I'm pretty sure that anytime I'll say that I got some, like on the subject of Tibet. Let's go into Tibet, right? I got a friend of mine sent me over some documents. We'll look at them in a later episode here. Where some people in Tibet, there are at least 14 on this document come in by some NGOs and probably Amnesty as well, that were saying these people are put in jail and tortured because that they've put up Tibetan flags on the National Flag Day. So the National Flag Day, they take that super seriously. The Chinese people, they love it. They come out. It's a big sort of like folk festival, and they raise the flag, you know. And some people have gone out and raised the Tibetan flag, and those people are probably dead, you know. They take that extremely seriously. Another thing that they take extremely seriously is religious propaganda. So in China, there are a lot of Muslim people. There's a lot of, I think my last check on the numbers there is like 40 million Muslim people. There's a lot of Christian people. There's mostly Buddhist people. They are sort of like, it is the biggest Buddhist community in the world. It is like culturally Buddhist. There are Buddhist temples everywhere that a lot of people visit. I checked up on the numbers and it said like, only this small percentage, which also means millions and millions and millions of people, much more than the Muslim and the Christian, but are Buddhist, but still a small percentage, but I would say still sort of bound to a Buddhistic cultural heritage.
I just wanted a quick brief overview, and I just went into Wikipedia because I see that as a semi-credible source in that it's crowdsourced, but it's checked by a lot of people. So
have you ever posted a wrong thing on Wikipedia? I can tell you, it goes very fast for it to be taken down.
But it says here, and I don't see the biggest necessity to be overtly critical towards these data, but it's like what it says here is like 1.8% is Islam, 5.1 is Christianity, then 18% Buddhism, and then we have folk beliefs.
Folk beliefs, sure.
So it's any kind of like, and that's like 20% as well, and then we have 50% with no religion.
Yeah. Which is one of the great sort of communist ideals, right, is to get rid of religion. And, you know, Marx's very famous quote that religion is the sigh of the oppressed creature. It is
the opium of the people. The
hope in a hopeless world. It is the opium of the people, exactly. That's the longer quote, you know. And okay, so it's like this. When I was in Beijing, it was a Friday. There was a mosque in the area, and mosques. Anybody that's lived anywhere with a lot of Muslims will know that mosques get filled up on Fridays, and a lot of the time there's going to be overflow, and people will be praying out on the streets. So this happened in the middle of in Beijing as well, and there was carpets put out on the street, and then some like police officers came and sort of helped with the traffic. Go the other way, go, you know, and made sure that the Muslim folks were able to do their prayers there for that hour or two or whatever. Just going to say that's something that doesn't happen in Denmark, because they immediately are being told to stop closing the street and all that. So there is sort of like, and there is sort of like you can practice your religion in China, but you can't propagandize it. You cannot try and get new.
What would that mean, like missionary work?
You can't do missionary work. And if you do missionary work, kind of like this thing of saying, I'm just going to put this Tibetan flag up, they take it extremely seriously. and I'll just say that I've just come across also on my endless research and trying to expand my algorithm, people having open discussions on the street with religious people in China. Kind of like this, what's it called? Speaker's Corner in London or something like that. Have you ever come across this?
In Hyde Park, yeah.
In Hyde Park, there's a lot of, these days it is rife with religious talk. A lot of the religious people meet there and with atheists and yell at each other. And I'll just say, I did notice, I saw that was also happening in China. People were there and talking the religious speak, saying like, yeah, but the problem is that you're taken over by the devil and, all of that kind of thing. If you propagandize, it means that even there was this, Qigong, which is actually, I think it has its sort of like origins in China, which is it's if people that don't know, it's kind of like Tai Chi. It's a type of like of physical movement, and it also has some kind of philosophy behind it, religious philosophy behind it, and they were recently more or less, disintegrated in China, and the people that were running that, because they were simply growing, and that means that they were propagandizing. So there was a shutdown of sorts, which I'm pretty sure happens a lot. So on the subject of these Abrahamic religions, Christian, we've not mentioned this. We have this area called as they call it in China, the autonomous region of Shenzhen, I think it's called. Shenzhen, is that right? It's upper eastern region. They don't look like they have like they're a different ethnic group, right? They have more sort of to do with they kind of look Eurasians or something like that. Something like Turkish, Georgian kind of heritage, and that is where the biggest population of Muslims are. You go in and check on you can find a lot of creators from that area. The Uyghurs, of course, Uyghur,
Xinjiang.
Xinjiang, yeah, the Xinjiang province is where the Uyghurs live. So, there are some numbers.
Yeah, I have a friend that traveled there. Like, he took the Trans-Siberian Express, and then he decided to get off the train there to check it out, and it was very depressing. It was very much like, shitty housing and like people just hanging out in the streets doing nothing. He even, just to make an example of what was going on here, he observed that to get shit-faced there, people would use gravity bongs, but they would put cigarettes. So they would put 7 cigarettes or something like into one bottle.
Intense.
And do the bucket trick, cut off the bottom, put it down, let the vacuum suck in a lot of smoke, take out the cigarettes, and then just...
Yeah.
And what he tried to do it because he was like, what the fuck is going on here?
Sure.
Like, let me try that gravity bong. And he got fucked up.
I'm sure he did.
So,
and I'm pretty sure that there's a lot of places in China that are pretty depressing, honestly. But as there is in a lot of places, just like I said before, there are some places in Europe that are extraordinarily depressing, that I just don't...
Let's talk about Detroit.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my God, everything is smashed. And then there are places where it's going, well, it's the same. Okay. Amnesty, there are a lot of different numbers out there, but the biggest number that I could find is that they believe that there might be like over 1 million people in what they call concentration camps in that area.
Okay.
That's the biggest number. There are smaller numbers, but let's just go with the biggest one. Why did they do that? So they didn't do it because, as far as I know, was not because, they're just becoming too Muslim.
But I'm curious, is this like, because, concentration camps.
So
is it like refugee camps or is it incarceration camps?
They are incarcerated, and there is some talk of, and probably directly from the Chinese state, because the Chinese state is quite obvious. That's another thing. The thing about, let's say, for just a quick side note here, let's talk the thing of surveillance, right? So they surveil everybody. They love surveillance. There's nowhere else in the world that has more CCTV cameras though there are some cities in the world, like Washington, D.C. is
London.
and London.
London was the most surveilled city at least 10 years ago.
And right now it's Washington, D.C. I've been trying to really get these numbers, and funnily enough, Stockholm as well, up on the top 5 of most overview societies. The difference is that they tell you in China. They don't hide any cameras. They have systems in each of the cities, different places that are constantly surveilling, and they say, we're here surveilling you. So if we didn't have Snowden, God bless Snowden, we wouldn't know about the NSA, who had deals with every European state to overview us and to surveil us, you know. So again, they don't have something that we don't have. There's just some slight differences. One of the differences is that they say it. It's out in the open. Okay, the thing about so what happened there? We had some people, they were Muslims, that basically were saying, we need our own caliphate up here, up and going. And it's going to be a Muslim caliphate. And if you're not going to give it to us, we're going to take it by force. So there was thousands of people killed in terrorist attacks in regional areas in that area. And you can trust the Chinese government to go to attack that with an unbelievably swift and aggressive tactic.
I mean, in Denmark, we had like terror, compared to this very small, act of terrorism against a specific speaker, and someone else got hit, and it was a very unfortunate event. But immediately armed police were put in place in front of a synagogue, and and I'm not trying to put any political bias into this. It's just a fact that, of course, even the Danish, very free, democratic, they fucking intervened quickly.
Exactly.
And let's talk about how 9/11 justified wars to the left and the right. I mean, nobody wants terrorism, and it seems like swift responses, also with violence, is just the common way to deal with it.
Yeah. And the way that, I'll say that, a lot of people, also in my social media threads and bringing up the Uyghur situation and all of that. And I was like, that's some fucking intense numbers and some intense human suffering that's going on there. And then after a while, I started thinking about how many people died in Iraq, And, they believe that it was 2 to 3% of the Iraqi population, 200,000+ people, that's just normal folks not being a part of anything that died, you know. And some of the numbers are up towards the million as well that were murdered and killed. These are different there aren't always different numbers. I'm having a tendency here to sort of downplay some of the numbers it's hard. I think what I'm trying to say is that just numbers come from different sources, and it's kind of hard to find a middle ground on it. So we don't know if it's 1 million people in China, but we definitely know that hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people were murdered under the guise of anti-terrorism in Iraq, killed by who was the first. Denmark was one of the first with England to join the fight. And only after Denmark joined the fight did Spain join the fight as well. And we are implicit in murdering, I would say, probably more Muslims than... See what's going on in Palestine and in Gaza right now. It is a genocide of Muslims. The whole point, that the whole way that they're managing to do that, that the whole world, Western world, isn't getting into it, is because of this period that we've been in over the last 10 to 20 years, where Muslims are the boogeyman, right? Okay. That's just a point to just kind of come across from that over to the thing of saying there is a moral superiority complex that the West has. We get, if you I listen to a lot of African podcasts and African news podcasts, and I've also heard sort of the Russian sentiments. Putin says it directly. It's enough with your hypocrisy. With the West's hypocrisy, your concept of human rights and all that. By the way, human rights, Geneva Convention, it's just for white people. They don't care about it if it's fair towards African folks or brown folks or whatever, the way that we divide it up in that way in our ethnic groups. It's just about, Euro ethnic groups. Anyway, so it's like, what's the point? The point is that we are definitely, there is a thing of the world that there is a new sort of way of speaking about the West and Europe, which is, we're done with your hypocrisy. We're done with you saying, you come here with your human rights and all of your rules and all of your things, and then you just do the other thing anyway.
Mm-hmm.
You just do it in a different way. And there is a positivity towards China and the way that sort of African they're doing business in Africa, even though there's a lot of problems going on there, by the way, which we can get into on another podcast. Our next podcast will be about Ghana, where I was also just in, and we'll talk about that and the sort of whole African experience there. But there is a positivity in the African sort of like general discourse about the way that China does things, because the deals are more clear and aren't as, there isn't this sort of moral thing, this decision, this how you do it, how you're supposed to do it correctly. Africans will say that people come in and they try to tell us how to live our lives and how many babies we're supposed to have, while they then make deals with us where we're not allowed to sell our gold to whoever the fuck we want, and we can only sell them. And there's also the whole concept of
this is all these examples. I think I know where you're going with it. It's kind of just to put into perspective that we can criticize China in a vacuum for certain things, and they probably deserve the criticism very much. I mean, we can say that because, I mean, we're not governing countries at that scale, and we want peace and prosperity for everyone, and culture and freedom of expression and all these things. But if we only look at it in a vacuum, maybe we're kind of missing some points here. And that leads us back to the main point of even starting this conversation, is that maybe we have biases.
Yeah.
And we don't want to exonerate China from any forms of criticism doing this, but it's just interesting that we have these enormous accomplishments, and just speaking about it opens up a conversation about these civil liberties and how China handled this and that. And well, we have our own issues also here.
Sure.
And the West have been like, what is let's talk about what is, like, now my inner leftist is awoken, but let's talk about how European and American wealth was created. You know, it was exploitation, imperialism. Our prosperity depends on the poverty of other people. Just we can't see it because it's in Africa, and it's in South America, and it's in India, and every company does this. They exploit these rules that can at times seem extremely absurd. You know, that it can be cheaper to transport something all the way to China and then get them to package it and then transport it all the way back to Europe, and then it's cheaper than producing it locally, which is just like, if you look at it out of the scope of how economics work and everything, is just absurd to me.
Sure.
So we're exploiting people, and China is exploiting people as well, and that's just what we wanted to get straight, I guess. That, you know, we criticizing a country, maybe not look at it completely in a vacuum. Like, it's
exactly. And that obviously it's also been, it's this, I've had a lot of people say to me when I talk to them about it, say like, you should go to China, man. If you were looking for a place to go, you know, buy a ticket to Beijing and have a good time, they'll be like, no, I'll never go over there, you know, for political reasons. I've had musicians tell me, no, I'm never going to go to China. I've even arranged shows that, no, I'm not going to go to China, you know, but they'll gladly go to the US and play. So there is a sort of obvious, those guys are the boogeyman, you know? And it kind of came up to me, in a way, one of my analysis was like, it's important for the political ruling class to have an enemy. Because I guess it's part of the, but we're doing so much better. I remember I experienced that when I went to I even had quite a experience when I went to Russia and was touring there for a while, and I was like, what the fuck? Why is there's a saying in Danish where it says, "Are you," like my mother would say to me, "Your room is very messy. It looks like a town in Russia." And then after I came back from tour and I was like in Izhevsk and going down the Donau River and all kinds of unbelievable cities that I'd never heard of and nobody else has heard of them, Kristowal and all kinds of places. And these cities were amazing. Yeah, beautiful, well-functioning cities. So sorry, where did I come from? Why did I talk about this? I guess it's just this thing of saying
people's perception
our
of
perception
what a
is being
city
controlled.
yeah.
Maybe it's a part of political discourse to be able to gather your amount of power that you have. The power that you have is that it is important to have somebody where you say, yeah, but look at those guys over there. It's all kinds of terrible over there, and look how well that we're doing, to sort of legitimize yourself.
Yeah, and you can see the tendency also stemming from like the optimism towards the U.S. Has been
Totally.
I mean,
that
now of course we have geopolitical issues with some instability, and with Trump and everything.
Totally.
Everybody is shaking their pants for good reasons.
Totally.
But there's a narrative coming from there since the Reagan era, which was, and probably even before that, like the communist kind of scare. And for good, for good reasons, because the version of communism that we even like was able to document was like the killing of the intellectual class and like horrible governing experiments, like we talked about earlier.
Yeah, Stalinism and all that. And
yeah, exactly. And so of course we're still, in a way, conditioned in our beliefs by that narrative.
Yeah. Exactly, and we're conditioned by that, and also, I just had this thought that I saw some numbers at one point about that until the 1960s, 70s, it was a common concept in Europe that the Russians won the Second World War, that they were the heroes, because they were the ones that killed Hitler. Right? But then after a while of, who knows, then common discourse came over to it. No, it was the Allies. It was, England and America that came in and saved our asses, which of course they did. And they also lent us crazy amounts of money and did all kinds of rebuild projects and all of that. So it makes sense that it kind of shifted. But who lost the most amount of men? Russia. The Red Army were fighting and pushing down.
But I would also say that let's not talk too much about the Second World War, but I mean, Russia also, took in, forcefully a lot of the countries, and of course, so the Americans also kind of brought negotiation power.
Sure. I hear you. Still an interesting anecdote, though, about...
who's the boogeyman?
Who's the boogeyman? Yeah. Right? And the boogeyman, it gets sort of moved around a little bit and used, whatever it is that's coming up, And So we are now at 1 hour and 12 minutes, and it seems like we've done nothing. We've probably not touched on half of the subjects that we wanted to touch on. But is there more that we would like? Is there something there on your list?
Well,
there
I wanted to get into, because...
Sorry, it's because we planned to just do an hour, but we decide what we want to do.
Yeah.
So let's just keep on going.
But I wanted to bring up a subject because it's also, now we've talked about a lot of stuff that is on a structural level and kind of talks into this... this reaction that you got, and what could be the reasons for that backlash when you try to, relay some of the positive experiences you had when traveling in China and stuff. But also one thing I remember you telling me about was, how people... We've talked a lot about how people in the West, about how people can't express themselves. I just wanted to kind of know what you experienced that people were able to express artistically, because that's within your field.
Yeah.
Because we, like you said earlier, like we can get this feeling, like this presupposition that people in China are just walking around in the same suit, not being able to do
can say that one thing is that some of my things is that there are like 56 different ethnicities in China, and they are really proud of each one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Like they do love nothing more better than to wear their cultural suits, to come out on a Saturday and go to out on the street and wear their things on their different holidays, of which also, by the way, that's another measurement I have of how well a society is doing, is like how many public holidays are there. And there are a lot in China, and everybody's off on those days. I've done quite a bunch of business. I bought like a dome from Alibaba. I also bought I've got this Rex tape concept, my little cassette tape player. I've talked to a lot of people trying to do a lot of business, and sometimes it's just closed down. Sorry, it's Dragon Day weekend, or and we go and clean our ancestors' graves and eat all day or whatever. So, I mean, what did I experience? I experienced that part of it. This sort of like the pride of the cultures within the culture.
But what about subcultures?
And so I mean, when I was there's a Danish artist called Mark Solborg. He's an avant-garde guitarist, and a guy came up to me and was like, "You're from Copenhagen, right? Do you know Mark Solborg?" So I was in Xiamen, and there was like a group of people that had come to see me because I did a project with him, and they were like, "Oh man, we fucking love free jazz. Yeah, we're super into avant-garde and free jazz." I also had some friends went to an art exhibition with like blow up dicks everywhere, just thousands of dicks everywhere, and then over in the corner there was like a gimp, meaning like a human being in a like leather suit that the artist maybe was like whipping a bit, and like it was just like extremely absurd. And in Chengdu they also have like one of the biggest theaters in the world, which is this big revolving theater. You guys should go and check it out. It's unbelievable, like a huge mechanic movement. Anyway, this is all big theatrical, nearly something like the Royal Danish Theatres or something like that on steroids, because China has the same thing as US, right? Everything is bigger. There is more of it. The buildings are taller. Everything is massive. So, I mean, the only sort of real subcultural things that I experienced was within. I'll just say that this tour also, like, it was a real music tour. It means like you're just on the road all the time. You go to sleep at night. The next time you're in a train on the way somewhere. Didn't have like the only time that I really had to explore was when I came to the cities and go for a long walk, right? But in those places, I experienced street music, street art. People on like a walking street, kind of like places that we have, it was places where promenades, where there was set up stages, and there was like at one point at a place we were playing, there was like a bunch of rappers, it was like they were obviously doing their beats. I was kind of thinking about, I wonder what they're rapping about, because it's probably not fuck the police, right? It's probably love the police, I call them, or whatever. What are they rapping about? All kinds of things, probably not sort of, that the police suck. Anyway, let's say one of the gigs that we played, it was on the outside, it's like called like Books and Coffee or whatever, right? And it just looks like a Berlin books and coffee shop, right? It's kind of like haphazard. They've pulled in some kind of like thing that they've made a table out of. There's t-shirts for sale. And then in the back, there is a big, just concrete room with a massive sound system and a big stage. And it fits like 200 people, 300 people. So and the backstage area filled with stickers everywhere, just like a place that you might come to in Berlin or in Hamburg or in Copenhagen somewhere. And it's got, art and expression and self-creation written all over it, So, again, like I just feel like I also, there is a social media over there. It's called Red Note. It's like Instagram. It's like the Instagram version.
They also have, and TikTok is Chinese, right?
TikTok is Chinese. It's called
because I have a segue. I wanted to ask you about TikTok because I'm not completely sure. Like, can everyone in, let's say here in Denmark, Do we have access to all the Chinese content?
No. The only way that you can... So all Chinese people can just download a VPN and then they can... That's it.
And that's like a culture for that.
Yeah. There's so many people.
Will they be... If the state finds out, will they be fucked?
No.
Okay.
Everybody that I know that I ever met at any time there had an Instagram, was like, let me follow you on Instagram. You know, and obviously they also have WeChat, which is that's like... Everybody has WeChat because again it's centralized.
Like WhatsApp.
It means it's like WhatsApp
or Messenger for Facebook.
Yeah, but then like this thing of like this is one of the big differences. Funnily enough, this thing of that isn't it annoying that we have Messenger, WhatsApp, Signal, Telegram, like 1,000 different things, and everybody's on all of them, and you have to have all of them if you want to communicate with people because some only use that. So over there they're a bit more like WeChat. It has everything. It's a message app. It's a payment app. It's a order a taxi. It's a order some food app. It's everything, and it has these mini programs inside it, which means that it's a one-stop place, which is very Chinese as well.
Is it state-owned?
Yeah, probably because most things are state-owned. You know, I'm pretty sure WeChat for sure it must be state-owned. You know, but and then, you know, it just runs so well. It works so incredibly well. You know, and then there's Red Note. I think that no matter what, if you start a company and you have some, like for example, Red Note, the Instagram version in China, if that's...
It's actually looks like it's not state-owned.
Not state-owned, but
it's a tech giant, but the tech giant is heavily regulated.
Heavily regulated. That's the thing. So just to say that this thing of state-owned or not state-owned, if you have a company of a certain size, you have to have part of the CCP, the party, as members of your board. You can only do business in China if you work together with the state. And you know, it's also the only place on earth, as far as I know, that over the last 10 years has executed 10 billionaires, including tech giants, because of because of corruption, because they didn't want to work together. They were not working for what the Chinese...
They executed them.
They were killed by the state for corruption. This is one of the reasons that Xi Jinping is so incredibly loved, is because one of his big things was, I'm going to fucking fuck up all the corrupt guys. And he started from the top, cutting off the head of the dragon, I guess, you know. And I bet nobody else does that. I would rather that they killed we have these tech oligarchs now, you know, Zuckerberg, Musk, and
I think I wouldn't ever condone of like killing, but you know, one thing I would say that would make
You're right.
me
I retract my offhand comment.
Do you recant, Michael? Do you recant?
Yes, I do.
Even though, like, sometimes I guess we need a French Revolution once in a while.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, we can look at the U.S. now and be like, hey, we can see what happens if you don't regulate tech giants.
Yeah,
and what power that Google has right now, what power does Meta have, what power does all these billionaires also openly backing a political candidate that serves their interest before the public's interest, at least from our point of view, I guess,
totally.
right? So we can say, okay, the Chinese are very strict towards what kind of media we should use and stuff, but another angle to attack it from, this is just assuming hypothetically that this is what their intentions are. We have a problem in Europe and the States that these things have gotten out of control. The most valuable resource of our time is data. And we've given it away for free. And now, lo and behold, we have a techno-oligarchy. And also, lo and behold, none of us can do anything about it. And we're trying to regulate, but it's moving so fast. So maybe it's not that controversial to actually have strict rules around it.
Yeah. Totally.
And maybe banning Facebook. I know that there's a narrative in the West that, especially when Facebook came out, that it's like, it's bringing freedom of speech, you know, opportunity for people. Like, it can drive revolutions. But did people really read what they signed up for? Sure. I mean, it can probably do that to some extent, but you know,
can also be maneuvered, which we know that it has been, right?
yeah,
That
and all the data gets sold, and like the lie is, in at least in my perception of it, is that Facebook is not the product. We are the product.
Yeah,
We're
sure,
getting bought and
totally.
sold, and
Totally.
that's why it's free. You know,
I
it's
remember that there was a period when Facebook was first starting to really sort of become massive. There were some people in Denmark trying to be like, hey, we should just hurry up and make our own. Okay? We need to hurry up and make kind of like the library in Denmark. We need to have the Danish social media thing.
That's what they did.
And then that's what the Chinese did, right? They were
and
like,
they
"We're
could
gonna
do that because they are a heavily regulated economy.
Exactly. They
And,
had the ability to go in and decide what they believe is best for you and people. And sometimes what comes out of that is that it seems more peaceful, less chaotic. And that's what the Chinese people are saying. This is the gift of our society. We are less chaotic than what you guys are experiencing over there. The chaos of our sort of like free market democracy capitalist situations means that every one of us has at least four messaging apps, 3, 4. We have the one on the phone, one from Messenger, one from Instagram, and it's all over the place. Baiting us into using them constantly.
I think I'm using like 5 different ones.
Yeah.
Like Signal, Telegram, WhatsApp, Messenger, Instagram. Yeah.
Signal.
I mean, yeah, Signal. I also said that, but and then of course the built-in thing in your phone that is just.
And
messages.
then the built-in, exactly, and that's and if we were to look at it, there isn't necessarily just a logic to that. There is some kind of absurdity inside that. Like how many times have I at one point thought like, oh God, I want one app. I want an app that gathers all the messages from all of those different places onto one place, so that I can just get all of my messages on one app, so that I'm not always checking it. Check if there's a thing, get notifications from a difference. This is just one small example of what it is that our sort of concept of freedom.
Yeah. In consumerism.
The freedom and consumerism gives us this experience.
Oh wow, I can pick 15 different kinds of ketchup.
I
must be free.
Exactly.
Yet I'm overwhelmed by the choices.
Yeah, exactly. And that's another thing. It's not like they don't have an enormous amount of ketchups in China, because they do. There is a lot to choose from. With this middle class growing up and with their enormous market and their own desire and their they still seem to have a lot of things going on. But on the messaging side, I feel like they cracked it. One.
This is just like, like in the EU for a lot of time, like for a long time, people were fucking annoyed by, like telecompanies, like charging different prices. And at some point, people got together and it was like, we all think it's annoying.
Yeah.
Let's fucking regulate it.
Exactly.
Now you can travel around and you don't have to bankrupt yourself doing a call. Also, telephone charges.
Yeah, totally.
Are we unfree because we regulated our way out of, like, in a vacuum? This little thing can put into perspective a more logical, I guess, pragmatic reason for why to make these kind of things.
Yeah, and then we have these companies that work against us, like Apple, that will constantly find a way to work around that. They made the USB-C law or something like that. Apple still has the thing. They'll move it. They'll change it. They'll constantly work around our rules and then still try and make a market where only their thing works for their thing, right? And there is some kind. That's also a part of our sort of they're free to do that, and then we have to then contra-regulate or whatever. While sort of the highly regulated society of China is just like, you know what, tech oligarch, you try to fuck with us one more time, it's off with your head. Again, I kind of want to reiterate one more time. Every single government in the world creates a lot of suffering for a lot of people. What we're trying to say here is not China is the best, even though that I have said that a few times, that it might be the best country in the world, and that's because I care very much about inequality and human suffering, and that I just saw very little of it there, okay? I did see very little of it.
But it is important to remember that what we don't know a lot about is the conditions of rural China, and that is very well known to be like that's. And China has a lot of economic, inequality. But at the same time, when we looked that up, it's like, yes, in a vacuum, it's true. It's very unequal. Then I looked at the United States, and I was like,
Yeah,
like it's fucking
what we're
booming
doing
out
here
of
is
control.
having sort of like we do a lot of we're doing a lot of sort of similar. So how is this compared to this outside of the vacuum, as you call it? There was another numbers that we came up on that was kind of like mind blowing. Was it like the access to healthcare in China?
Yeah, I sat there and looked at it before.
And the only way, like, if you were to say to me, I think the number you said to me was like 95% of the Chinese population have some kind of access
they
to
have medical access,
free medical access.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, you told me that.
But then also a lot of the social coverage is through their work. Like you get social coverage from work, much like in Denmark. But in Denmark, of course, we have kontanthjælp. We have like the what used to be almost universal.
Sure. They do have a certain version of that in China as well. I asked a lot of people about it. They were like, yeah, but it's not a lot. It's the same that anybody else would say, like even in Spain or some other European countries, like, yeah, of course you can, but it's not a lot, or yes, you can go to school, but the schools are sucks, or the hospital isn't very good. People will say that to me in China as well, like, yeah, but I would probably rather go to the private hospital or whatever, But but the only way that I could understand that if a number is 95% in China, what's the number in Denmark? Do you remember?
Yeah, I had it in like I think Denmark has like 88% social coverage. I found that in the EU, the European Labor Force Survey. You can look those kind of stats up, and I did an assignment where I had to compare social coverage in Germany and Denmark. And Germany doesn't have a lot of coverage.
Okay.
They're a very conservative country, and then I compared the stats, and in Denmark we have, of course, a lot. Even though the unions are deteriorating and members are kind of falling out, we still have like 80-something% covered by unions. And if not that, then we also have like a very universal welfare system.
Sure.
So, of course, Denmark is one of the most covered countries.
Yeah.
But, So, but coverage can mean a lot of different things. So it's
That's
not just one number that you'd
Sure.
have to look into what is welfare in this country and
what's their concept of it and all that. But one of the takeaways is that, again, it's very surprising.
But 95% medical coverage it's nice. I mean, it's good. You don't lose your job or your house because you get. And then we have, of course, now it's become like a Prügelknabe, like our scapegoat in the US. But I mean, it's just relevant because the US is a very free country, but it has certain paradoxes, this freedom. And they have the most expensive, like listen to Bernie Sanders, he will reiterate it and reiterate it, the most expensive health care system in the world.
Yeah.
Yet it is very ineffective. And it's basically a fucking scam between insurance companies and hospitals. And if you get, like, I remember if you got corona and you got put in the hospital and you stayed there for a week or whatnot, you had to do, it was like $14,000, which is insane.
Yeah. It's an insane amount of money. They really, So again, these sort of like this way of dividing up and setting up, like, again, in a vacuum, it might look bad when we take it up and put it into perspective with the rest of the world. It's obvious that China is doing pretty well, and that they're doing
on certain
parameters, and that this sort of concept between this sort of like this idea of this freedom that we have also has some consequences and some absurdities and some sort of some things that don't serve us as the people, and the same is true for China. There are some things of their lack of press freedom that makes them that has all kinds of consequences, negative consequences, and there are some positive consequences around it as well. The thing of having and I think that this podcast, people should go away from it also just feeling like, okay, this thing that I knew about the Uyghurs, like it's like, yeah, a lot of people, that's just the one thing they know. One thing that Henry and I, after even the first time we went to China, come back, nobody in their right mind in Western media would ever tell a positive story from China. It's always like, China builds world's biggest, China builds world's biggest solar plantation. But at what cost? Like they will never tell a positive story.
At the same time, do you remember when there was like a big visit back when the diplomatic issue was, should Copenhagen Zoo get a panda?
Oh yeah.
And they came, or the government officials from China, and there was a free Tibet demonstration on a metro station, and it got fucking shut down instantly.
Yeah,
and
nice,
people were arrested in Kongens Nytorv. And then,
so we just like, no, freedom until, oh yeah, this is another good example. I love this example. That's a great example. There's also, I once tried to go, friends of mine, I didn't join. Some friends of mine went to when King Frederick and Mary were getting married, and they went with a sign that just said, Frederick and Mary, all good. Frederick and, Fatima, because they were like, why is it so? They came out, they didn't even get the banner up, and a couple of cops said, floored them, put them into the thing and got them out of there. So, of course, we have other situations where we have enormous, where we do control. Very hardcore, and in a way, I'm kind of like, I don't know. Maybe I've become
a climate summit as well.
Yeah, There's a lot.
Was it like
a lot of people?
I worked in Amnesty International back then, and I remember we went out into the streets. Of course, it was like a fundraising department that I worked for, and the thing started, the demonstrations, and then there was this woman. She was a human rights lawyer staying for the summit, and she came with panic in her eyes, running towards us because she saw the Amnesty logos, and she was like, they're taking people away, it's insane, they're arresting people, and they put fucking Hare Krishna in strips in wintertime on the streets. What have they done? They didn't even, they delivered cake and was singing.
Doing that thing.
And then they got to sit 4 hours in the cold.
And then most of people, they will say, yeah, but listen, we work too hard on this fucking society for you guys to come and fuck it up. So sometimes we're gonna just have to roll in and just put you in jail and hold you back for a bit. Even this thing, now I'm so China a CCP pill CCP, right? Yeah, China's Republic. Children's Public, whatever. No, I'm obviously China pilled, using some online lingo here, right? But when I heard this thing about the free Tibet thing, and my first thought was like, we don't want to make it bad. We don't want them to feel bad. Our nice zoologist friends from China. We just want them to feel nice and welcome, and sure, let's get some of that. Shut up! It's not about Tibet now, assholes. Shut up! I can kind of get behind it. I want my guests to feel welcome, But I totally get that that's a kind of wild statement, because there's also a part of me that says, yeah, but the way that we deal with that in the West is we just don't pay them any mind. They don't do, like, when have you ever seen a demonstration work? Have you ever? The biggest demonstrations against the Iraq war was the biggest as I remember, the biggest in Danish history, right? Anti-war demonstrations, hundreds of thousands of people. Which is,
I think it's a little reductive to say they won't work, because it's rippling. Like, if what we also talked about the other day was like what is the percentage of
policy?
Not directly.
No. Indirectly, yes, I can get around that. But they still went to war. They murdered hundreds and thousands of people. They didn't pull back. They went back to Afghanistan. That, like, the sort of, I'm one of the ways that we deal with that is just, my point that I'm trying to make is, we just ignore them. Like, we just let them do their thing, and then tomorrow we'll get back on.
But I also think that stems from complacency in the culture around demonstrations, that when it actually worked, people fucking put consequences behind it. Now we just kind of show up, and like, I think it's important to organize and to but we kind of show up and we didn't really risk anything.
No.
Like back in the day, like social democratic, union workers trying to change the society for the better, they fucking bled for it.
Yeah, sure.
And they also came from a circumstance of being threatened.
Yeah.
And a lot of these demonstrations that we talk about, we're simply too complacent, and also the later generations haven't experienced the kind of poverty and inequality that
they were fighting against.
Yeah, exactly. So fighting back then was serious.
Yeah.
And people got incarcerated and stuff.
Sure.
Today it's like, hey, we meet up, we have our lunch packages, and and then after a couple of hours we kind of just wander off and we buy shit.
I totally get that.
Yeah,
I get it. And
I just wanted to put it into.
I see that, and I will also just say that there's a lot of that. People say that people can't demonstrate in China, but as far as I know, there are over 100,000 demonstrations in China a year, on the data that I could find anyway, with just like how many times do people get on the streets and get out there and demonstrate against something that also in their local, because as we talked about, China is like, state level, provincial level, all of that. There's all the way down, and there are demonstrations, people gathering to show their harmony or whatever, or say that they have a subject that isn't being taken care of without them getting murdered, okay? Even though that they do have for example, the story that we have from there is, of course, the Tiananmen Square massacre, that everybody anybody that mentioned that to me, or I talked to some artists that had done paintings and work around it, said that was one of the greatest tragedies of their society, and but that's the only version of demonstrations that we have any version of in China, but that's just not the truth. And there are also many different types of demonstration methods. There's one that's going on around the China now with a lot of young people that are saying, guys, you said to us, if we took an education, we could get a job, right? So their version is not student riots, which we've had a lot of student riots in the EU and around that are like the same issue. Hey, you told us that this was the deal, and now there's nothing going on, right? Or you're not funding us. Well, in China, they found out this other way of doing it, where just like 100 or 200,000 people, or young people, were suddenly observed lying face down on the street at the same time across the nation. And I honestly, I can't think of a more impactful, nearly bordering on like artistic demonstration than that. Like it's very clear. It doesn't and that I gotta say that's China centric. I don't know anywhere else of a peaceful demonstration thought out and applied and able to be done than in
well,
that.
it does happen, but it's probably not in the same. I haven't. Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said about the information you just provided that we can't really. This is more like your notion of it and like what your
sure.
But I get the point, and it's. I have one point that we can maybe use to round this off a little bit, which is a point that now we're talking about the West as we. We're talking about China as them. Yeah. We're talking about, but what are we talking about? We're talking about governmental structures and organization of power and how legal questions are solved and how amenities are created, all of these stuff. But me and you as people are, of course, against a lot of the stuff that our governments, it's not, I think some of the friends that gave you some backlash, they aren't advocating either.
No.
For the governmental policy, so they have another point of moral superiority, which is I don't like any of it, and you saying something good about China puts you in a position where I have to attack you because I'm against this and I'm against that. But I think a point that is good to remember here is something that I picked up from my studies as well. When you do market research, you talk about. Because what you can see across the world is that the demands of customers around the world, because of the internet, because of globalization, because of shared social media access and stuff like that, and like you told me, like people use VPNs to use the same social media as us, and we also use Chinese social media in the form of TikTok and stuff. This creates a reality where most normal people look at the same reels. They do the same kind of humor stuff. They get interested in the same trends. The same music, the same, and in market terms, what you call it is glocalization. And I don't remember the exact numbers, but what the point is, like if you're trying to sell products to people, you want to understand the demographic, their needs, their demands. And what people have been starting to see is that you can actually market some of the same stuff in the same way to people in China that you can in, like, the people from the millennial generation and younger have more in common with each other across the globe than they have with their grandparents.
Yeah.
In the same country. You know, like I have more in common with a Chinese person my own age using the internet and being part of this than I have with my grandparents, socially, culturally, in terms of what we talk about, the language we use, slang, like the understanding of political realities and whatever we we kind of choose to share. And I just think that's an important point because you're an artist. Man, like, what is your fucking job as an artist? Why should you, like, who are you playing for? You know, like, if some people want to boycott China, you said, like,
sure.
But I mean, who are you playing for? You're probably playing for the like-minded people in that country.
Oh my! You know what? I can't believe that there's a word for it, and I always love our conversations here because I came back. Were you wanting to go into?
No, it's fine.
Because I came back and I kind of explained this in a different way. That over my last 20 years of traveling around the world and playing music, now when I come, it's not a cultural exchange anymore. It's because that's what it was 20 years ago. There was like this, like, other culture meets this other culture. That's not what happens anymore. When I go to play in Thailand, I'm one of their own. When I get booked at a festival to play my ambient oud, the harp, that spinning harp, right? I'm not representing a culture. I'm just us. We're a part of the same
cultural
culture.
Niche. Yeah.
We're a part of a culture together, all of us. We all understand. It doesn't matter that they're from Vietnam and half American and Chinese and everything. Everybody just gets it because we're a part of that culture, the international culture of that particular niche, right? So it's fun to hear you explain it in sort of like a different way than, because I went there and I had that experience and I was like, wow, something has changed. The world is changing. It's no longer go on cultural exchange. It's actually
this term comes from strategic management. It's not some like violet humanistic fantasy about the world. I mean, I'm a huge believer in the, both anthropological and humanistic way of interpreting the world and doing science on that basis, but this can even be fucking measured.
Sure.
Like, economists that want to make a lot of money can pragmatically calculate that this is a tendency.
Yeah.
That you can assume this and make money out of it. Yeah. Which microeconomics is about. So it's just...
That's kind of what we're doing. That's why I'm going back to China all the time, right? Because I'm like, well, if people like it here in Denmark, at the amount that they like it, there's going to be more over there that like it.
Yeah, and one of the challenges of you marketing your music here is that niche that you're talking towards is probably not... There's probably not enough people in Denmark that appreciate exactly that for you to have like a very thriving career, even though you got a lot of recognition and a lot of public attention around your work. For the modern artist, it's very important to get out there and find like the broader niche, and we have so many people in China. So you finding the niche in China means that you will have more people than living in Denmark interested in your music potentially.
Exactly. So yeah, well, this is a great way to come to the end of our podcast. I think that we are all part of different types of international niches these days. The globalization thing of, inevitable peace on earth. This is what this is all about. What do we do as artists? You're an artist as well. What is the actual sort of reason that we try to create things of great beauty and dare to make to dig out of ourselves even the most fragile of things to be able to show it to the world, is because we are working for the common good. We want the sort of the flora of humanity to be seen, and we are doing our small part for that. And when I went over there and I see that there is and come back and telling these stories, that I see that there is misconceptions going on about us culturally, and that the truth is that the people over there are the same as us, but that our sort of governmenting systems are at war, but we, the people, are not. And if we, the people, can start to meet and create all of these bonds between us, this thing of not seeing each other as enemies, or as at least seeing as different, so different that we can't talk to them, that if we can erode that, we have a better chance of peace on earth.
Yeah, sure. We have to talk, we have to trade, we have to fuck, we have to we have to realize that we probably have more in common than we have in disparities.
Yes, Baba. Okay, I'm gonna say thank you so much. This was 1 hour and 50. We did an amazing job, twice the amount that we thought. We know a little bit more now. Guys, this is, if now maybe you're watching this years from now, probably, as one long thing, but actually this was created for and by our great members of the REXEN Patreon, coming to you from Langeland. Emil and I are the guys behind the Patreon, and I'm just going to quick shout out to you guys. You're now going to be watching it for the first time in 4 different episodes, and then in a while we're going to cut it. It'll all be one big thing, and we'll put it on YouTube for everybody to enjoy. Yeah, you guys on Patreon, you're the reason that we are making this work. Thank you so much for your support. Tell your friends, and peace on earth. Signing out.